A black woman in a waitress's uniform stood her ground against the ruthless young Mafia boss. His strike missed, never landing. Dera slipped back just in time, her movements precise and fluid. In one explosive motion, she whipped both legs upward in a backflip kick, the impact hurling him off the table and sending him crashing hard to the floor. Before the fight began, this was what the Mafia boss did to the innocent waitress, an act that set everything in motion. Before you continue, please subscribe to our channel and also like and comment. This will indicate that you are engaging with our story. The punch came out of nowhere. Dera's head snapped back as knuckles connected with her jaw, the metallic taste of blood flooding her mouth. The dinner plate she'd been holding shattered against the restaurant floor, porcelain shards scattering like broken promises across the worn linoleum. Around her, the evening crowd gasped in collective shock, forks frozen halfway to mouths, conversations dying mid-sentence. She stumbled backward, catching herself against table 7, where the Henderson family had been enjoying their Tuesday night special. Mrs. Henderson screamed. Her husband pulled their 2 children close, shielding their eyes from the violence unfolding mere feet away. Dera's vision blurred, stars dancing at the edges of her sight. Through the haze, she saw him, Chin-Wo. Everyone in the city knew that name, whispered it in back alleys and dimly lit bars with a mixture of fear and reverence. He stood before her now, all 6 feet of designer-suited menace, his hand still raised from the blow he'd just delivered. 3 of his men flanked him, their expensive watches glinting under the restaurant's fluorescent lights, their faces carved from the same stone of casual cruelty. "You spilled sauce on my shoe," Chin-Wo said, his voice carrying that particular brand of calm that comes before a storm. He lifted his foot slightly, showing off an Italian leather Oxford that probably cost more than Dera made in 3 months. A small orange stain marked the toe. "Do you know how much these cost?" Dera touched her lip, felt the split skin, saw the blood on her fingertips. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady. Controlled. A technique she'd learned long ago in another life, in a place where bleeding was as common as breathing. "I apologize," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain radiating through her jaw. "It was an accident. Let me get something to clean that." She started to move toward the kitchen, but one of Chin-Wo's men, a boulder of a human being with a neck like a tree trunk, stepped into her path. The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their clattering, drawn to the doorway by the commotion. "An accident?" Chin-Wo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You hear that, boys? She says it was an accident." He took a step closer to Dera, invading her space with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "I don't accept apologies from people like you. You know what I accept: payment, compensation, respect." Marcus, the restaurant manager, finally emerged from his office, his face already pale with recognition. Marcus was a good man, had given Dera this job 6 months ago when she'd first arrived in the city, desperate and alone except for her grandmother. He'd asked no questions about her past, hadn't pressed when she'd been vague about her previous employment. Now, watching him approach Chin-Wo with his hands raised in placation, Dera felt a surge of guilt. This was going to cost him. Men like Chin-Wo didn't forget slights, real or imagined. "Mr. Chin, please," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm sure we can work this out. The meal is on the house, of course, and we'll pay for the shoe cleaning, replacement if necessary." Chin-Wo didn't even look at him. His eyes remained fixed on Dera, assessing her with the cold calculation of a predator sizing up prey. "I didn't come here for free food. I came here because someone told me this place had good service. But what do I find? Clumsy waitresses who can't do their jobs. Disrespect." "Sir, I truly am sorry," Dera tried again, fighting to keep her voice level, to keep the old instincts buried deep where they belonged. "Please, let me make this right." One of the other gang members, younger than the others with a scar running down his left cheek, laughed sharply. "Listen to her beg. Maybe she needs to learn a lesson about service." Dera's fingers twitched, just once. A tiny movement that nobody noticed, but she felt it like an earthquake in her bones. The old training, the old reflexes, stirring from their forced hibernation. She clenched her hand into a fist, willing them back to sleep. Not here, not now, not ever again. She'd made a promise to her grandmother, to herself. The violence, the fighting, the blood, it was all behind her. She'd come to this city to be normal, to be invisible, to care for the only family she had left. Her grandmother, lying in a hospital bed across town right now, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed with each labored breath. Lung cancer, the doctors said. Stage 3. Treatable, potentially curable, but the surgery cost more than Dera could ever hope to earn waiting tables. That's why she needed this job. That's why she couldn't fight back, no matter what these men did to her. Chinwo reached out suddenly, grabbing Dera by the collar of her uniform. The cheap fabric bunched in his fist as he pulled her closer, his breath hot against her face. It smelled like expensive whiskey and entitlement. I think you need to get on your knees and apologize properly. The restaurant remained frozen. Dera could feel every eye on her, could sense the fear radiating from the other diners, the staff. Could see Marcus's face, pleading silently with her to just comply, to let this man have his moment of power so he would leave and they could all go back to their lives. She started to lower herself, started to bend, started to give this monster what he wanted. Then Chinwo spat in her face. Before you continue, please subscribe to our channel and also like and comment. This will indicate that you are engaging with our story. The warm saliva hit her cheek, sliding slowly down toward her jaw. Around them, someone gasped. Mrs. Henderson's daughter started crying. And something inside Dera, something she'd kept locked away for 6 months, for her grandmother's sake, for her own salvation, cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked. That's better, Chinwo said, smirking. Now lick my shoe clean. Dera raised her hand slowly, wiping the spit from her face. Her movements were deliberate, controlled. She looked down. At the ruined Oxford, at the small orange stain that had started all of this. Then she looked up at Chinwo, meeting his eyes for the first time with her full attention. He flinched. Just slightly, barely noticeable, but she saw it. Saw the momentary flicker of uncertainty cross his face as he glimpsed something in her gaze that didn't belong to a simple waitress. Something ancient and sharp and completely without fear. No, Dera said quietly. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Chinwo's face darkened, confusion giving way to rage. What did you just say to me? I said no. Dera's voice remained calm, but now there was steel underneath it. I apologized. I offered to make it right, but I won't lick your shoe. Find your dignity somewhere else. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the restaurant held its breath. Then Chinwo's hand flashed out again, faster this time, meaner, aimed not at her face but at her throat. A strike meant to hurt, to punish, to remind her of her place in the hierarchy of power. It never landed. Dera's hand moved on pure instinct, catching his wrist mid-strike. Her fingers wrapped around his arm with a grip that made Chinwo's eyes widen in shock. She wasn't just stopping his attack. She was controlling it, redirecting it, holding his entire arm immobile with seemingly no effort at all. What the? Chinwo started, but Dera was already moving. She twisted his wrist, a simple motion executed with perfect technique, and Chinwo yelped in pain as his body automatically followed the direction of the joint lock. His knees buckled. In half a second, the most feared Mafia boss in the city was on the ground, his face pressed against the same floor he'd wanted her to lick his shoe on. The 3 gang members exploded into action. The big one, the boulder, came at her first, his meaty fist swinging in a wide haymaker that would have taken her head off if it connected. Dera ducked under it easily, her body responding to threats the way a musician's fingers remember a familiar song. She drove her palm into his solar plexus, not hard enough to kill, but with enough force to empty his lungs in a single whoosh of expelled air. He staggered back, gasping, his face turning purple. The scarred one was smarter, coming in low, trying to tackle her at the waist. Dera pivoted, bringing her knee up to meet his descending face. The crack of cartilage breaking echoed through the silent restaurant. He went down hard, blood pouring from his shattered nose, not unconscious but definitely out of the fight. The third one, older than the others with gray at his temples, actually hesitated. He'd seen what she'd just done to his companions, seen the way she moved, and some survival instinct deep in his lizard brain was screaming warnings. But loyalty or fear of Chin-Wo proved stronger than self-preservation. He reached into his jacket, going for what was almost certainly a gun. Dera closed the distance before his hand cleared the fabric. She struck his elbow, numbing the nerve, then swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The gun, a compact 9mm, skittered across the floor and came to rest under table 12. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 8 seconds. Dera stood among the fallen men, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, her waitress uniform somehow still mostly intact except for the stretched collar where Chin-Wo had grabbed her. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt like herself. Then she remembered where she was, who she'd promised to be. The restaurant remained frozen in stunned silence. Every single person stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to awe to fear. Mrs. Henderson had her phone out, and with a sinking feeling in her stomach, Dera saw the woman was filming, had been filming. The entire thing was recorded. "Oh no," Dera whispered. Chin-Wo groaned from the floor, pushing himself up on shaky arms. His expensive suit was rumpled, his carefully styled hair mussed. But worse than the physical damage was the look in his eyes. Humiliation, rage, the promise of retribution. "You're dead," he hissed, spitting blood. One of his front teeth was chipped. "You're dead, you hear me? You and everyone you love, I'm going to." "You're going to leave," Marcus said suddenly, surprising everyone including himself. The manager stood by the door, holding it open, his face pale but determined. "Now, before I call the police." Chin-Wo laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "The police? You think the police can protect you from me? From what I'm going to do?" But he was getting to his feet, signaling his men to do the same. The big one was still wheezing, the scarred one's face was a mask of blood, and the older one limped heavily as they assembled behind their boss. Chin-Wo pointed at Dera, his finger trembling with rage. "I know your face now. I'll find out everything about you, where you live, who you care about, and I'm going to make you regret the day you were born." Then they were gone, limping out into the night, leaving behind only drops of blood on the restaurant floor, and a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. Dera stood motionless for a long moment. Then her knees gave out and she sank into the nearest chair, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a truck. Her hands started to shake, not from fear, but from the realization of what she'd just done, what she'd just exposed. Marcus was beside her immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Dera, are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She touched her split lip, already swelling. "I'm fine. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Are you kidding?" Marcus's voice was almost giddy with relief and residual fear. "You just saved everyone in here. That guy, Chin-Wo, he's notorious. Last year, he put a restaurant owner in the hospital for 3 months over a perceived insult. You stopped him. You protected us." But Dera shook her head, her stomach churning with dread. "You don't understand. Men like him don't forget. He'll come back. He'll bring more people. He'll—" "Let me worry about that," Marcus said, though his voice wasn't entirely convincing. "Right now, let's just be grateful everyone's safe. Why don't you take the rest of the night off? Go home, rest, process this." Dera nodded numbly, but as she stood, she noticed the other diners. They were all looking at her differently now, not with the polite invisibility that service workers usually received, but with fascination. Fear. Respect. Mrs. Henderson was still filming. "Please," Dera said, turning to the woman. "Please don't post that video." Mrs. Henderson lowered her phone, but her expression was conflicted. "Honey, that was incredible. You're a hero. People should see this." "Please," Dera repeated, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "You don't know what you'd be starting. Just delete it, please." The woman nodded slowly, but Dera saw at least 3 other phones pointed in her direction. In the age of social media, in a world where everything was recorded and shared and went viral in minutes, her plea was already futile. She grabbed her jacket from the back room, her hands still trembling as she pulled it on. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from St. Mary's Hospital, the automated system reminding her that her grandmother's surgery consultation was tomorrow morning at 9. The surgery they couldn't afford. The surgery that was her grandmother's only chance at survival. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd kept herself hidden, kept herself small, kept her skills buried specifically so she could earn money for that surgery. And in one moment of lost control, she'd potentially destroyed everything. The night air hit her face like a slap as she exited through the back door, avoiding the growing crowd of curious onlookers gathering out front. The alley behind the restaurant smelled like garbage and old cooking oil, but it was quiet, and right now quiet was what she needed. Dera leaned against the brick wall, closing her eyes, trying to center herself. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, from one of their conversations last week when Dera had visited the hospital. "You seem troubled, child," her grandmother had said, her voice weak but still sharp with perception. "What's weighing on your spirit?" "Nothing, Grandma. I'm just worried about you." "Don't lie to an old woman. I can see it in your eyes, the same look your mother had right before she left for that last mission." Her grandmother's hand, thin and fragile, had gripped Dera's with surprising strength. "Promise me something. Promise me you won't go back to that life. That world of violence, it took your mother from us. I won't lose you too." "I promise," Dera had said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "That life is behind me. I'm just a waitress now. Normal, safe." But normalcy was a luxury people like her couldn't afford, apparently. Her phone buzzed again. Not a text this time, but a call. Unknown number. Dera's instincts screamed at her not to answer, but she did anyway, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hello." Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice, electronically distorted. "That was quite a show you put on tonight." Dera's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Let's just say I'm someone who appreciates talent when I see it. You humiliated Chinwo. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "If this is a threat." "Not a threat. A warning. Chinwo's reputation is everything to him. You didn't just beat him. You emasculated him in front of witnesses, in front of his own men. He can't let that stand. He'll come for you with everything he has." "Then why are you calling me?" A pause, then, "Because I'm curious to see what happens next. Chinwo thinks he's a king in this city. Maybe it's time someone reminded him he's not." The line went dead. Dera stared at her phone, her mind racing. This was bad, worse than bad. She'd painted a target on her back, on Marcus's back, possibly on her grandmother's back. And for what? Pride. An inability to control her own instincts. She started walking, not toward her apartment, but toward the bus stop that would take her to St. Mary's Hospital. She needed to see her grandmother, needed to make sure she was safe, needed to figure out what to do next. The bus was nearly empty at this hour, just a few exhausted workers heading home from late shifts and a teenager with headphones nodding off in the back. Dera took a seat near the middle, watching the city slide past the windows. Neon signs advertised everything from bail bonds to payday loans to adult entertainment. This was the part of the city that tourists didn't see, where people like her lived and worked and struggled to survive. Her phone buzzed continuously now. Social media notifications, dozens of them. Against her better judgment, she opened the apps. The video was everywhere. Not just Mrs. Henderson's footage, but multiple angles, multiple perspectives. Someone had already edited together a highlight reel, complete with slow-motion replays of her taking down Chinwo's men. The captions varied. "Waitress destroys Mafia boss. Don't mess with service workers. Kung Fu waitress serves justice." The views were climbing rapidly. Thousands, tens of thousands. In the hour since the incident, she'd become a viral sensation. The comments section was a mixture of amazement and speculation. Where did she learn to fight like that? Chinwo got D Elmao. This is staged right. Has to be staged. Someone find out who this woman is. That's some Jason Bourne-level stuff right there. Dera's hands tightened around her phone. This was a nightmare. She'd spent 6 months being invisible, being nobody, and now her face was being shared across the internet by strangers who had no idea what they were unleashing. The bus lurched to a stop outside St. Mary's Hospital, and Dera practically ran through the automatic doors. The night receptionist, a young woman named Katie who recognized Dera from her frequent visits, waved her through without question. "Your grandmother's sleeping," Katie called after her, "but you can sit with her if you want." Dera took the elevator to the 4th floor, her heart pounding with each ascending number. The cancer ward always smelled the same, antiseptic and flowers and something else, something harder to name. Desperation, maybe. Hope fighting a losing battle against reality. Her grandmother's room was at the end of the hall, room 447. Dera pushed the door open quietly, stepping into the dim space illuminated only by the glow of medical monitors. Her grandmother lay in the bed, small and frail under the white sheets, oxygen tubes running to her nose. But her eyes were open, sharp and alert despite the late hour. "Dera," she said, her voice a whisper, "what happened to your face?" Dera touched her swollen lip, having forgotten about it entirely. "It's nothing, Grandma, just a clumsy moment at work." Her grandmother's eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me, child. I can see it written all over you. You fought someone." There was no point in denial. Her grandmother had raised a warrior, had watched Dera's mother become one of the most formidable fighters in their discipline before she died. She could read violence the way others read books. "A customer got aggressive," Dera admitted, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "I defended myself, that's all." "That's never all." Her grandmother reached out, taking Dera's hand in her own. "I made you promise, no more fighting, no more violence." "I know, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "It better not." But there was worry in her grandmother's eyes, not anger. "Men who hit women don't forget being embarrassed. You need to be careful." "I will be. The surgery consultation is tomorrow at 9. I'll be here." Her grandmother squeezed her hand weakly. "We'll figure out the money somehow. We always do." But they both knew that wasn't true. The surgery cost $37,000. Dera had saved less than $4,000 in 6 months of working double shifts. They didn't have time for somehow. The cancer was spreading. Dera stayed another 30 minutes, watching her grandmother drift back to sleep, the steady beep of the heart monitor a reassuring rhythm. When she finally left, the night nurse at the station smiled at her. "Your grandmother's stable tonight," the nurse said. "That's good news." "Thank you," Dera replied, but the words felt hollow. She left the hospital as the clock struck midnight, stepping back out into the cool night air. Her apartment was a 40-minute walk from here, but she needed the time to think, to process, to figure out her next move. Chin-Wo's threat echoed in her mind. "I know your face now. I'll find out everything about you." With the videos going viral, he wouldn't have to work hard. Someone would identify her, would connect her to the restaurant, would lead him right to her doorstep. And if he found out about her grandmother, vulnerable and helpless in that hospital bed. Dera's phone rang, shattering her thoughts. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. "Marcus, is everything okay?" "Dera," his voice was tight, stressed. "I need you to come by the restaurant tomorrow morning before your shift. 10 o'clock, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. About what happened tonight. "Just, please come by, 10 o'clock. He hung up before she could respond. That wasn't good. That was the tone of a man who'd made a difficult decision and didn't want to discuss it over the phone. Dera had heard that tone before, usually right before bad news landed like a hammer. She barely slept that night, lying in her small studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the street lights dance across the cracked plaster. Every sound made her jump. Every car door slamming, every footstep in the hallway outside, every distant siren. She kept her phone on her chest, checking the video's view counts compulsively. They'd reached 500,000 views across various platforms. 500,000 people had watched her break her promise to her grandmother. When dawn finally broke, gray and reluctant through her single window, Dera dragged herself out of bed. She had 2 hours before she needed to be at the restaurant, so she showered, dressed in clean clothes, and tried to make her swollen lip look less noticeable with some concealer she rarely used. Her reflection stared back at her from the bathroom mirror. She barely recognized herself. The waitress uniform was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple black jacket, but it was her eyes that looked different. For 6 months, she'd kept them downcast, submissive, the eyes of someone trying to disappear. Now they held something else, a sharpness, an awareness. The warrior was awake again, and she wasn't sure she could put her back to sleep. The walk to the restaurant took 25 minutes. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that seeped through jackets and into bones. The streets were busy with people heading to work, to school, to wherever life demanded they be. Nobody looked at her twice. She was just another face in the crowd. Except she wasn't, not anymore. When she reached the restaurant, Marcus was already waiting outside, his arms crossed, his expression grave. He didn't invite her inside. That told her everything she needed to know. "Marcus," she started. "I can't keep you on staff, Dera," he said quickly, as if ripping off a bandage. "I'm sorry. After what happened last night after those videos, I got 3 phone calls this morning. 3. People I've never met but who made it very clear that if you continue working here, bad things will happen to this restaurant, to me, to the other staff." "I understand," Dera said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "It's okay, I don't blame you." "It's not okay. You saved us last night. You protected everyone in that building. And this is how I repay you." Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket. 2 weeks severance. It's not much, but it's what I can do. I'm sorry, Dera, I really am." She took the envelope, her hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "Thank you for giving me a chance these past 6 months." "If things were different," Marcus trailed off, but they both knew it didn't matter. Things were what they were. Dera walked away from the restaurant. From the job that had been her only source of income, from the normalcy she'd been desperately clinging to. The envelope in her pocket felt heavy, but she already knew it wouldn't be enough. 2 weeks' pay was maybe $800. Added to her savings, she'd have less than $5,000. $32,000, short of saving her grandmother's life. She checked her phone. 8:45. The surgery consultation was in 15 minutes, and she was a 30-minute bus ride away. She started jogging toward the nearest bus stop, her breath misting in the cold air, her mind spinning through impossible calculations. Maybe she could take out a loan. But with no job, no collateral, no credit history worth mentioning, what bank would give her $30,000? Maybe she could ask the hospital for a payment plan, but cancer didn't wait for payment plans. Maybe she could. What? Go back to her old life. Start taking fighting contracts again. That world had consumed her mother, had taken her from Dera when she was just 8 years old. That world was blood and broken bones and a darkness that never fully washed away. The bus pulled up, brakes squealing, and Dera climbed aboard, swiping her card with shaking hands. She found a seat near the back, pressing her forehead against the cool glass window, watching the city blur past. Her phone buzzed. A text from St. Mary's Hospital. "Ms. Johnson, Dr. Reeves is ready for your grandmother's consultation. Please proceed to room 447. She was going to be late. Dera closed her eyes, fighting back the burning sensation behind them. She wouldn't cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to salvage this disaster. The bus hit traffic, crawling through an intersection at a pace that made Dera want to scream. She checked the time. 8:58. She was going to miss the consultation. The doctors would reschedule, but every delay was another day the cancer spread, another day her grandmother slipped further away. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. Dera's finger hovered over the decline button, but something made her answer. "Hello." Silence, then heavy breathing, then a voice distorted and cold. "Dera Johnson, 26 years old, waitress at Marco's family restaurant. Currently residing at 2847 Bleecker Street, apartment 3B. Every muscle in Dera's body went rigid. "Who is this?" "More importantly," the voice continued, Grandmother Evelyn Johnson, 68 years old, currently a patient at St. Mary's Hospital, room 447. Stage 3 lung cancer. Quite the predicament you're in. If you touch her. Dera's voice came out as a growl, drawing stares from other passengers. You'll what? Beat me up like you beat up Chin Wo, the voice laughed. Oh wait, you can't because we already have her. The world tilted. What? Check your grandmother's room, Dera. You'll find it quite empty. The line went dead. Dera's hands were shaking so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. She immediately dialed the hospital, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. St. Mary's Hospital, how may I direct your call? Room 447, 4th floor, cancer ward. Now! Dera didn't recognize her own voice, sharp and desperate. One moment, please. The hold music was a special kind of torture. 15 seconds that felt like 15 hours. Then the nurse's station picked up. 4th floor, this is Jennifer. Room 447, Evelyn Johnson. I need to know if she's okay. Right now. A pause, keyboard clicking. Then, I'm showing Mrs. Johnson was transferred about 20 minutes ago. Transferred? Transferred where? It doesn't say. Let me check with the doctor on duty. More clicking. A longer pause. Ma'am, Dr. Reeves says there was no scheduled transfer. Mrs. Johnson was supposed to be in consultation right now. Where did you hear she was transferred? Dera was already moving, pushing past passengers toward the front of the bus. Stop the bus. Ma'am, we're not at a stop. Stop the goddamn bus. The driver hit the brakes, more from shock than compliance. Dera jumped off before the doors fully opened, landing hard on the sidewalk, already running. St. Mary's Hospital was still 15 blocks away. She covered the distance in less than 8 minutes, her lungs burning, her legs screaming, pedestrians jumping out of her way as she sprinted through them like they weren't there. She burst through the hospital's automatic doors so fast they barely had time to open. Katie, the night receptionist now ending her shift, called out in confusion, but Dera was already at the elevators, slamming the button repeatedly. Too slow. She hit the stairwell instead, taking the stairs 3 at a time, her hand on the railing to swing herself around each landing. 4th floor. She exploded through the door, running past startled nurses and patients, straight to room 447. The door was open. Inside, chaos. Dr. Reeves stood beside the empty bed, his face pale, speaking rapidly into his phone. 2 police officers were there, one taking photos of the disconnected medical equipment, the other interviewing Jennifer, the nurse who'd been on duty. The bed where her grandmother should have been was empty. The sheets were pulled back, the IV stand tipped over, the heart monitor displaying a flat line because no one was connected to it anymore. No, Dera whispered, then louder's no. Dr. Reeves turned, his expression shifting from professional concern to genuine sympathy when he saw her. Ms. Johnson, I'm so sorry. We're trying to piece together what happened. Approximately 25 minutes ago, 3 men in what appeared to be medical transport uniforms entered the room. They showed credentials to the nurse on duty, said they were transferring Mrs. Johnson for an emergency scan. By the time we realized there was no scheduled scan, they were already gone. One of the police officers, an older man with gray in his mustache, approached Dera. Ms. Johnson, I'm Detective Martinez. I need to ask you some questions. Do you have any idea who might want to take your grandmother? Dera couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, her vision tunneling. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Ms. Johnson, Detective Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away. Do you know anyone who? Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number, just an image. Dera opened it with trembling fingers. The photo showed her grandmother, still in her hospital gown, unconscious or sedated, slumped in a wheelchair. Behind her stood Chin Wo, his face still bearing the bruises from last night, his chipped tooth visible in his cruel smile. He was holding up a newspaper, today's date clearly visible, proof of life. Below the image, a message. You have something I want. I have something you want. Check your email for instructions. You have 24 hours. Ms. Johnson, who's that from? Detective Martinez moved closer, trying to see her phone. Dera pulled it away, her mind racing. If she involved the police, Chin Wo would kill her grandmother. Men like him didn't make idle threats. He'd proven that last night, humiliated in front of his own men, and now he wanted blood. Revenge. To restore his reputation by breaking her completely. Ms. Johnson, if you know something. I don't, Dera lied, her voice hollow. I don't know anything. The video from last night, the other officer, younger, spoke up. The one where you fought that man, could this be related? Dr. Reeves's eyes widened. What video? But Dera wasn't listening anymore. She was backing toward the door, her phone clutched in her hand, her mind shifting into a mode she'd kept buried for 6 months. The training, the instincts, the killer her mother had raised her to be. I have to go, she said. Ms. Johnson, you can't leave. We need to. But she was already gone, running back down the hallway, ignoring the calls from behind her. She hit the stairwell again, pulling up her email as she descended. One new message, no subject line, from an anonymous account. She opened it. Dear Dera, or should I say the hidden tiger. Yes, I know who you really are. Daughter of the legendary Chen Mei, the woman who could kill 6 men before they drew their weapons. I've done my research. You've been hiding here playing waitress, pretending to be normal. But we both know what you really are. A weapon. My weapon now. You will come to my estate alone. No police. No heroes. You will kneel before me in front of my men, the same men you humiliated, and you will apologize. Then you will work for me. Your skills, your training, everything you are belongs to me now. Refuse and your grandmother dies slowly. Painfully. I'll send you videos. Accept and she lives. You have until midnight. The address is below. Come alone or she dies. Come armed, she dies. Resist, she dies. Your only chance is complete submission. Chin Wo. Dera reached the ground floor, bursting out into the morning sun that suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. People moved around her, going about their normal lives, completely unaware that her entire world had just collapsed. She read the address. The West Side Estate, the most exclusive area of the city, where the wealthy and powerful lived behind gates and walls. Of course, that's where Chin Wo would be, untouchable, protected by money and influence and the corruption that came with both. 24 hours, but Dera knew she didn't have 24 hours. Every minute her grandmother spent in Chin Wo's custody was a minute closer to death. He wouldn't wait. He'd use her grandmother as leverage until Dera broke completely, then he'd kill them both anyway. Men like Chin Wo didn't leave loose ends. A taxi pulled up to the hospital entrance, dropping off an elderly man with a walker. Dera ran to it before it could pull away. West Side Estate, she said, climbing into the back seat. Fast. The driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. West Side, that's a 40-minute drive with traffic. Gonna cost you. I'll pay double, just drive. He shrugged and pulled into traffic. But within 5 minutes, Dera realized he was taking the scenic route, probably trying to rack up the fare. They hit construction, then a school zone, then he stopped for coffee. I said fast, Dera growled from the back seat. Lady, I'm going as fast as I can. Roads are what they are. Dera checked her phone. She'd been in this cab for 12 minutes and they'd barely covered 2 miles. At this rate, it would take over an hour. Her grandmother didn't have an hour. She leaned forward. Pull over. What? We're not even close yet. Pull over now, or I'm getting out while you're moving. The driver, sensing something dangerous in her tone, pulled to the curb. Dera threw 2 20s at him and got out. They were on a main street, traffic flowing steadily in both directions. She needed a car. Fast. Her eyes landed on a black sedan parked illegally in front of a convenience store. Engine running, driver inside buying something. Dera walked over calmly, opened the driver's door as the owner emerged from the store with a coffee in hand. Hey, what are you? Emergency, Dera said, sliding into the driver's seat. Call the police, report it stolen, you'll get it back. Are you insane? Get out of my car. But Dera was already slamming the door, locking it, throwing the car into drive. The owner banged on the window, screaming, but she was pulling into traffic, her foot heavy on the gas. She'd learned to drive in her training, taught by instructors who believed a weapon should be proficient in all forms of combat, including vehicular. Dera wove through traffic like water flowing around rocks, smooth and inevitable. Horns blared. People shouted. She didn't care. Westside Estate was 30 miles away. She covered it in 18 minutes, running 3 red lights and hitting 80 on the highway. Police sirens wailed behind her twice, but she lost them both, her focus absolute. The estate appeared ahead, a sprawling complex of mansions surrounded by a 15-foot wall, the entrance blocked by an ornate iron gate with a guard station. Dera didn't slow down. She aimed the stolen sedan directly at the gate and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The guards saw her coming, their eyes widening in disbelief. One reached for his radio. The other pulled his gun. The sedan hit the gate at 60 miles per hour. Metal screamed. The gate buckled but held for a fraction of a second before the hinges ripped free from the stone pillars. The car punched through in an explosion of twisted iron and broken masonry. Dera's head snapped forward against the airbag as it deployed, but she was already moving, shoving the deflating bag aside, kicking the door open. The 2 guards recovered from their shock, both drawing weapons now. On the ground, now. Dera stepped out of the wrecked sedan, her eyes locked on the mansion at the top of the long driveway, a grotesque display of wealth and excess. Somewhere in there, Chin Wo had her grandmother. "I said on the ground." The first guard advanced, his pistol trained on her center mass. Dera reached behind her back, her hand moving to the concealed compartment she'd sewn into every jacket she owned 6 months ago. The one she'd promised herself she'd never use again. Her fingers closed around familiar metal. She drew the collapsed baton in one smooth motion, flicking her wrist. The weapon extended with a sharp click, 3 feet of reinforced steel. "Last warning," the guard shouted. Dera didn't respond. Didn't need to. She closed the distance before he could process her movement, the baton striking his gun hand with surgical precision. The pistol clattered to the ground. She pivoted, bringing the weapon around in a horizontal arc that caught him across the temple. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to drop him instantly. The second guard fired. The shot went wide, panic making him pull the trigger too fast. Dera moved like smoke, like a ghost, like everything her mother had trained her to be. The baton deflected his second shot with a sharp metallic clang, the bullet ricocheting harmlessly into a decorative fountain. She closed in, struck his elbow, then his knee, dismantling his ability to fight in less than 3 seconds. Both guards were down. More would come. Dera could hear alarms blaring from the mansion now, could see figures moving behind windows. She looked at the baton in her hand, at the 2 unconscious men at her feet, at the broken gate behind her. There was no going back now, no more hiding, no more pretending to be something she wasn't. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Promise me you won't go back to that life." "I'm sorry, Grandma," Dera whispered to the wind, "but that life is the only thing that can save you now." She started walking up the driveway toward the mansion as more guards poured out of the entrance. 6 of them, then 8, then 10, all armed, all converging on her position. Behind them, she could see Chin Wo standing on the mansion's front steps, her grandmother's wheelchair beside him, a gun held casually to the old woman's head. "Stop right there," one of the guards shouted, all their weapons now trained on her. "One more step and we open fire." Dera kept walking, slow, measured, each step deliberate. "I said stop." She didn't stop. They opened fire. The first shots went wide, warning shots meant to make her retreat. But when she continued advancing, they aimed center mass. Real bullets, meant to kill. Dera's right hand moved in a blur, reaching into her jacket again, this time pulling free something she'd kept hidden even from herself. A weapon she'd sworn never to touch again, her mother's blade. It was barely 12 inches long, more like an oversized knife than a true sword, but in the right hands it was deadlier than any gun. The metal was old, folded steel that had been in her family for 3 generations, the handle wrapped in worn leather that had molded to her mother's grip, then to hers. She drew it as bullets tore through the space where she'd been a heartbeat before. And then Dera moved like she'd been born to, like the weapon her mother had forged her to be, like the hidden tiger Chin-Wo's email had called her. The blade sang through the air, impossibly fast, catching bullets on its edge and deflecting them with sharp, ringing sounds that echoed across the estate grounds. Not all of them. She wasn't superhuman, but enough. Enough to close the distance while the guards stared in disbelief at what they were witnessing. The first guard she reached didn't even see her coming. One strike to disarm, another to disable. He went down. The second tried to track her movement, but she was already inside his guard, the blade's handle striking his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. 3 more guards converged from her left. Dera spun, the blade whirling in a defensive pattern that deflected their shots, and then she was among them, a whirlwind of controlled violence. The sword's edge never touched flesh. She didn't need to kill them, just stop them. But there were so many. For every guard she dropped, 2 more appeared. Her shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed her. Her ribs screamed from an impact she barely remembered taking. She was fast, but not invincible. A guard got smart, went low, tried to tackle her legs. Dera vaulted over him, using his back as a springboard, landed rolling. Came up already moving toward the mansion's entrance, where Chin-Wo still stood with her grandmother. His expression had changed from smug confidence to something approaching fear. He pressed the gun harder against her grandmother's temple. "Stop," his voice cracked slightly. "Stop or I'll kill her right now." Dera froze, 20 feet away, surrounded by a circle of guards who'd finally caught up with her. All their weapons pointed at her, all their faces showing shock at what she'd just done. "Drop the sword," Chin-Wo ordered. Dera's chest heaved, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood dripped from her shoulder, from a cut above her eye she didn't remember receiving, but her hand remained steady on the blade. "Let her go," Dera said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Your fight is with me." "Oh, our fight ended last night when you humiliated me," Chin-Wo replied. This is about teaching you the cost of disrespect. Now drop the fucking sword before I redecorate my steps with your grandmother's brain matter." Dera looked at her grandmother. The old woman was conscious now, her eyes finding Dera's across the distance. There was no fear in them, only pride, and something else, permission. The kind of permission a warrior gives another warrior when death is inevitable. No, Dera wouldn't accept that, couldn't accept that. She opened her hand. The blade clattered to the ground. "Good," Chin-Wo smiled, that same cruel expression from the restaurant. "Now kneel." Dera slowly lowered herself to her knees, her eyes never leaving her grandmother's face. Around her, the guards relaxed slightly, thinking the threat was over. They had no idea what was coming. Because as Dera knelt, as she placed her hands on the ground in apparent submission, her fingers found something. A fallen guard's pistol, lying just within reach, partially hidden by his unconscious body. Her mother's voice echoed through her memory, a lesson from childhood training. The greatest weapon is not the blade in your hand, but the enemy's belief that you're beaten. Chin-Wo was still talking, still gloating, savoring his victory. "You're going to work for me now. You're going to use those skills to." Dera's hand closed around the pistol. She moved. If you want to see what happens next, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get absolutely insane. Drop a comment telling me if you think Dera can save her grandmother, and let's continue this journey together. Time seemed to slow as Dera rose from her kneeling position, the pistol coming up in one fluid motion, her aim steady despite the wounds, despite the exhaustion, despite everything. Her finger found the trigger. But Chin-Wo was faster than she expected. He was already moving, pulling her grandmother in front of him as a human shield, his own gun pressing even harder against her temple. "Did you really think?" he started. The shot rang out. But Dera hadn't aimed at Chin-Wo. She'd aimed at his hand, the one holding the gun. The bullet struck his wrist at an angle designed not to go through, designed not to risk her grandmother. Chin-Wo screamed, his hand spasming, the gun falling from nerveless fingers. Dera was moving before it hit the ground, faster than she'd moved all day, faster than she'd moved in 6 months, everything she'd been holding back finally unleashed. She covered the 20 feet in less than 2 seconds, dropping guards who tried to intercept her with brutal efficiency. No more mercy, no more restraint. She reached the steps as Chin-Wo stumbled backward, clutching his ruined wrist, his face twisted in pain and rage. Dera's grandmother's wheelchair rolled slightly to the side, and the old woman looked up at her granddaughter with eyes that held a lifetime of understanding. "I'm sorry," Dera whispered, not to Chin-Wo, but to her grandmother. "Sorry for breaking her promise. Sorry for becoming violence again." "Don't be," her grandmother whispered back. "I'm proud of you." Then the old woman did something unexpected. She reached down, picked up Chin-Wo's fallen gun with shaking hands, and pointed it at the Mafia boss who dared to use her as leverage against her granddaughter. "Nobody," Evelyn Johnson said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, "threatens my family." The remaining guards had finally organized, were moving in, more of them than Dera could handle alone, even with her skills. This was it. The end. Either they'd take her and her grandmother into custody, or they'd kill them both. There was no escape from this many armed men. But Dera didn't care anymore. She'd saved her grandmother. That was enough. Then, from the shattered gate behind them, engines roared. 5 black SUVs screamed up the driveway, doors flying open before they'd even fully stopped. Armed figures poured out, but these weren't more of Chin-Wo's guards. These were different, professional, military precision in their movements. And at the front, stepping out of the lead vehicle, was a face Dera hadn't seen in 6 years. Master Chen, her kung fu instructor, the man who'd trained her mother, the man she'd left behind when she'd tried to escape this life. "Stand down," Master Chen commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. The figures with him, all former students, all deadly in their own right, fanned out to surround Chin-Wo's guards. "This is private property," one of Chin-Wo's men shouted. "You're trespassing." Master Chen ignored him, walking straight to Dera. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes held something like relief. "I saw the videos," he said quietly. "I knew you'd need help." "Master, Later, first, we deal with this." He turned to face Chin-Wo, who was still clutching his wounded wrist, his face pale with blood loss and fear. "You made a grave mistake, Chin-Wo. You attacked one of mine." "Your people have no authority here," Chin-Wo spat, but his voice shook. "I'll have every cop in the city." "No," Master Chen interrupted. "You won't, because if you involve the authorities, I'll make sure certain information reaches certain people. Information about your trafficking operations, your protection rackets, your connections to the murders of 3 city councilmen. Should I continue?" Chin-Wo's face went from pale to ashen. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Test me." The standoff lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then Chin-Wo's shoulders sagged in defeat. He'd been outmaneuvered, outmatched, and he knew it. "Take her," he muttered to his guards, gesturing at Dera. "Take them both and get out." Master Chen nodded to his students. They formed a protective circle around Dera and her grandmother as they loaded the old woman back into one of the SUVs. Dera retrieved her mother's blade, her movements mechanical, her mind still processing everything that had just happened. As they prepared to leave, Master Chen turned back to Chin-Wo one final time. "If I hear you've retaliated against her grandmother, against anyone she cares about, I will come back. And next time, I won't be so merciful." The drive away from the estate was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of a portable medical monitor one of Master Chen's students had attached to Dera's grandmother. The old woman had fallen asleep, exhausted from the ordeal, her breathing steady if labored. Dera sat beside her, holding her hand, her own wounds forgotten. The adrenaline was fatting now, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and the weight of what she'd done, what she'd become again. "The tournament," Master Chen said from the driver's seat. "It begins in 2 weeks." Dera looked up. "What?" "The International Martial Arts Championship. I was calling to tell you about it when all this happened. The prize money is $50,000, more than enough for your grandmother's surgery." "Master, I can't. I promised her." "She just watched you fight off a dozen armed guards to save her life," Master Chen interrupted gently. "I think the promise has already been broken. The question now is what you do next. Continue hiding or embrace who you truly are." Dera looked down at her grandmother's sleeping face, thought about the promise she'd broken, the violence she'd unleashed, the person she'd sworn never to be again. But she'd saved her. That had to count for something. "Tell me about the tournament," Dera said quietly. Master Chen smiled. "The story was just beginning. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens at that tournament. The real fight hasn't even started yet. Drop a comment telling me if you think Dera should compete, and I'll see you in the next part. Peace." The next 2 weeks became a blur of pain, sweat, and rediscovery. Master Chen had taken them to the compound, the same hidden facility in the mountains where Dera had trained as a child. Her grandmother was settled in the medical wing, receiving proper care from doctors Master Chen trusted, specialists who asked no questions and accepted payment in ways that didn't involve insurance companies or paperwork. "She's stable," Dr. Lin told Dera on the 3rd day. "The cancer hasn't spread further, but she needs that surgery soon, within the month." "She'll have it," Dera promised, and this time she believed it. The training began at dawn. Master Chen didn't ease her back into it. There was no time for gentle reintroduction. The tournament was 13 days away, and Dera had spent 6 months letting her skills atrophy, letting her body forget what her mind still remembered. "Again," Master Chen's voice cracked like a whip as Dera completed her 100th form, her muscles screaming protest. "Your mother could do this with her eyes closed. Are you telling me her daughter is weaker?" Dera gritted her teeth and started again. The forms were meditation in motion, each movement precise, each transition flowing into the next. Strike, block, pivot, sweep. Her body remembered even if it protested. Muscle memory ran deeper than conscious thought. By the end of the 1st day, she could barely walk. By the end of the 3rd day, she was moving like water again. By the end of the 1st week, she was better than she'd been 6 months ago. But Master Chen pushed harder. "You're fighting in the tournament to win money," he said during a rare break, watching her demolish a practice dummy with a combination that would have hospitalized most fighters. "But others are fighting for different reasons. Pride, glory, revenge. Some are fighting because they're paid to fight. Those are the most dangerous." "What do you mean?" Dera asked, wiping sweat from her face. Master Chen's expression darkened. "The tournament draws attention. Money attracts wolves. Not everyone who enters does so with honor. Some will bring weapons. Some will try to kill you in the ring and make it look accidental. You need to be ready for anything." The warning settled over Dera like a cold blanket, but she pushed it aside. She'd deal with whatever came. She had no choice. Her grandmother visited the training hall on the 8th day, looking stronger than she had in months. The medication and proper care had given her back some vitality, some of the fire Dera remembered from childhood. "You're beautiful when you fight," her grandmother said, watching Dera spar with one of Master Chen's advanced students. "Just like your mother." Dera paused, breathing hard, her opponent backing off respectfully. "Mom fought to protect people. I'm fighting for money." "You're fighting to save my life," her grandmother corrected. "That's protection, that's love, your mother would understand." She reached into her robe and pulled out a small cloth bundle. "I've been saving this, waiting for the right moment." Dera took it, unwrapping the fabric carefully. Inside was a strip of red silk, faded with age, embroidered with a golden tiger. "Your mother's headband," her grandmother explained. "She wore it in every fight, said it reminded her what she was fighting for, family, honor, survival, now it's yours. Dera's hands trembled as she held the silk. She could almost feel her mother's presence, could almost hear her voice offering guidance from across the years of separation. "Thank you," she whispered. The final days of training were brutal. Master Chen brought in fighters from other schools, sparring partners who tested every aspect of Dera's skills. Grapplers who tried to take her to the ground. Strikers with reach advantages. Speed fighters who darted in and out like wasps. Each one taught her something, exposed a weakness, forced her to adapt. On the 13th day, Master Chen called off training. "Rest now," he said. "Your body needs recovery time. Tomorrow we travel to the city. The tournament begins the day after." That night, Dera couldn't sleep. She sat in the courtyard, the red headband wrapped around her hand, staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Chinwo was planning something. She could feel it. Men like him didn't accept defeat. They festered, plotted, waited for the perfect moment to strike back. "You're worried about the Mafia boss," Master Chen said, appearing beside her like a ghost. For an old man, he moved with unnerving silence. "He won't let this go," Dera replied. "I humiliated him, ruined his operation. He'll come for revenge." "Perhaps, but not directly. Not anymore. He knows you're protected now. He'll need to be clever." Master Chen sat beside her, his weathered face thoughtful. "The tournament is public, visible, many witnesses. If something happens to you there, it would be very difficult to trace back to him." The implication hung heavy between them. "You think he'll send someone, another fighter?" "I think he'll do whatever it takes to destroy you without destroying himself in the process. Be vigilant, Dera. Trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long." The tournament was held in the Grand Arena, a massive complex in the heart of the city that usually hosted concerts and sporting events. But for 3 days, it belonged to the martial arts world. Fighters from across the globe had gathered, representing dozens of styles and disciplines. The energy was electric, dangerous, charged with testosterone and ambition. Dera registered under her mother's fighting name, Red Tiger. The preliminary rounds were almost insultingly easy. Her first opponent, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist, lasted 43 seconds before she dislocated his shoulder with a throw he never saw coming. Her second, a Muay Thai fighter with a reputation for devastating leg kicks, went down when Dera caught his kick and swept his standing leg in the same motion. By the quarterfinals, people were talking about her. The mysterious Red Tiger who fought with a style nobody could quite identify, fluid and adaptive, changing techniques mid-combination like she was reading her opponent's minds. The semi-final match was harder. A Russian Sambo expert who was built like a bear and fought like one too. He absorbed punishment that would have dropped lesser fighters, kept coming forward, kept pressing. Dera had to dig deep, had to access techniques she hadn't used in years. When she finally caught him in a triangle choke and felt him tap out, her ribs ached and her knuckles were bloody. But she'd won. One more fight. One more opponent between her and $50,000. Between her and her grandmother's surgery. The finals were scheduled for the next evening. Dera spent the intervening time resting, meditating, preparing mentally for whatever came next. Master Chen said nothing, but she could see the concern in his eyes. When she entered the arena for the final match, the crowd was deafening. Thousands of spectators packed the stands, their cheers and shouts creating a wall of sound that seemed almost physical. Dera walked to the center of the ring, the red headband tied around her forehead, her mother's blade secured at her back despite regulations saying weapons weren't allowed. She'd insisted. Master Chen had arranged it. Her opponent entered from the opposite side. He was tall, lean, moving with the economical grace of a true master. His face was hidden behind a traditional mask, black silk embroidered with silver. He wore no identification, no flag representing his country, no school patch. Anonymous, deliberate. As he approached, Dera felt something cold slide down her spine. Warning, danger, this wasn't right. The referee, a respected elder from the tournament committee, stepped between them. Traditional rules, no strikes to the groin or eyes, no biting, no small joint manipulation. Fight continues until submission, knockout, or referee stoppage. Understood. Both fighters nodded. The referee backed away. The bell rang. Dera's opponent didn't move immediately, just stood there, studying her. She could feel his eyes behind the mask, calculating, assessing. Then he shifted his stance slightly, and Dera's blood ran cold. She knew that stance, recognized the precise weight distribution, the subtle positioning of the hands. It was her style, her school. The techniques Master Chen had taught her mother that her mother had taught her. "Who are you?" Dera demanded. The masked fighter didn't answer, just attacked. He was fast, incredibly fast. His strikes came in combinations Dera recognized because she'd practiced them 10,000 times. He knew her style because it was his style too. Every technique she used, he had a counter for. Every trap she set, he avoided. They moved across the ring in a deadly dance, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. The crowd was on their feet, screaming, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a fight. This was art, violence elevated to poetry. Dera's ribs, still tender from the semifinal, screamed with each impact. Her opponent targeted them relentlessly, precise strikes that accumulated damage with surgical precision. She was slowing down. He wasn't. Then she saw it, a glint of metal, something in his hand that shouldn't be there. A blade, small, concealed, but deadly. This wasn't a tournament match. This was an assassination. Qinwo, it had to be. He'd found someone from her own school, someone with her training, someone who could match her skill for skill. And when skills were equal, the one willing to cheat one. The masked fighter lunged, the blade aimed at her ribs at an angle that would puncture her lung. That would make it look like she'd simply collapsed from exhaustion. The crowd wouldn't see the weapon. The cameras might not catch it. She'd die in the ring, and Qinwo would have his revenge. Dera's hand moved on instinct, reaching back, drawing her mother's blade. Their weapons met in a shower of sparks. The crowd gasped. The referee shouted something, but neither fighter paid attention. This had gone beyond tournament rules, beyond sport. This was survival. They separated, circling, both armed now, both deadly. Dera could see her grandmother in the front row, being held back by Master Chen, her face twisted with fear and pride in equal measure. "Surrender," the masked fighter said, his voice distorted but familiar somehow. "You can't win this. He's offered me a fortune for your life." "Then you'll die poor," Dera replied. They came together in a flurry of steel and motion, blades singing, each strike met and countered, neither giving ground. Dera felt the edge of his weapon slice across her shoulder, felt warm blood flow, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. When facing a skilled opponent with equal weapons, victory goes to the one who's willing to sacrifice more. Dera saw her opening, a gap in his defense that would only exist for a fraction of a second. But to take it, she'd have to leave herself open, would have to accept a wound to deliver one. She took it. His blade sank into her side, shallow but agonizing. Her blade struck his mask, shattering it, revealing his face. A face she recognized. Zhang Wei, a student from her mother's generation, someone who'd trained alongside her, who'd competed with her, who'd always been second best. "You," Dera gasped, understanding flooding through her. "You killed her, you killed my mother." Zhang Wei's expression confirmed it, guilt and defiance warring across his features. "She was in the way, always in the way, and now you're in the way too." Rage flooded Dera's system, burning away pain, burning away exhaustion. She attacked with everything she had, every technique, every skill, 20 years of training compressed into 30 seconds of absolute fury. Zhang Wei defended desperately, but Dera was beyond technique now. She was something primal, something unstoppable. Her blade found his wrist, his knee, his shoulder. Each strike deliberate, precise, dismantling his ability to fight without killing him. Because she wanted him alive, wanted him to face justice for what he'd done to her mother. Zhang Wei collapsed, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers, blood pooling beneath him. Not fatal wounds, but ending wounds. Dera stood over him, her chest heaving, her side bleeding, her vision blurring. The referee was shouting, trying to stop the fight, but the crowd was louder, chanting, screaming, witnessing something they'd never forget. "Finish it," Zhang Wei whispered. "You know you want to." Dera raised her blade, looked at her grandmother, tears streaming down the old woman's face, looked at Master Chen, his expression unreadable, looked at her mother's headband, now stained with her own blood. She lowered the blade. "No," she said quietly. "You'll live, you'll answer for what you did. That's justice. That's what she would have wanted." The referee raised Dera's hand. Winner, by submission, Red Tiger. The crowd erupted. $50,000, her grandmother's surgery, her mother's name honored, justice served. Dera collapsed into Master Chen's arms as he rushed into the ring, her grandmother close behind despite her frailty. They held her as medical personnel swarmed, as police arrived to arrest Zhang Wei, as the reality of what she'd done, what she'd won, finally hit her. "You did it," her grandmother whispered. "You saved me, saved yourself, saved your mother's honor." "I'm sorry I broke my promise," Dera replied, her voice weak. "You didn't break anything, child. You became who you were always meant to be, a warrior, a protector, a tiger." 3 weeks later, Dera sat in her grandmother's hospital room, watching the old woman sleep peacefully after successful surgery. The cancer was gone. The doctors said she'd make a full recovery. Master Chen entered quietly. "The tournament committee wants you to compete next year. They're offering to sponsor you." "No," Dera said. "I fight to protect, not for sport, not for glory." "Then what will you do?" Dera thought about it, about everything that had happened, about the life she'd tried to leave behind and the life she'd been forced to reclaim. "I'll do what my mother did. I'll use my skills to help people who can't help themselves. The ones the system ignores, the ones people like Qin Wo prey on." Master Chen smiled. She'd be proud. Outside the hospital window, the city stretched endlessly, full of danger, full of need, full of people waiting for someone strong enough to stand between them and the darkness. Dera would be that someone. The hidden tiger was no longer hidden. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you're subscribed because we've got more incredible tailies coming your way. Drop a comment telling me what you think Dera should do next, and hit that like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay strong, stay fierce, and remember that sometimes the greatest strength comes from protecting the ones you love. Peace.